What up, everybody? It's the Build Different Podcast back again. Sean, Ricky. Shout out to Leonard Jackson, Elemental's music for the opening as usual. Haven't given him a shout out in a little while. Today we want to talk a little bit about something that Sean and I go back and forth a lot about a lot. Primarily because there's not a lot of sports on right now, and football's taking a little bit of a hiatus. But to both of us, it's like one of the most exciting parts of football, even if it's the off season. But that's the draft, the evaluation of these players, and kind of what teams are thinking about each one of these guys that are performing. So, particularly in this episode, we want to talk about the draft combine because that happened, last weekend. So, Sean, what did you think overall? What do you think about this year's combine in comparison to the last few?
I thought it was a good combine. Um, Obviously, it's always exciting when like a very difficult record is broken, and that was obviously done this year by Xavier Worthy, and I think Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State also broke a record for the offensive lineman. So
38.5 for a man that's 6'6", 311 to jump 38.5 inches is wild, right? And Xavier
that's
Worthy, obviously, with the 4.22, well, 4.21 actually. Sorry, he beat
yeah,
out John. Get the guy's name out
Ross,
of Washington. John Ross,
John
yeah,
Ross.
John Ross. Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
so
his career didn't end up turning out. So it's always that thing too. Is like these things are amazing, feats, but what does that do as far as your potential as a NFL prospect?
yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes these things can really, like the combine can really influence your draft position. Like if you have a crazy time, like Xavier Worthy wasn't really good at the first pick. Like I think a lot of people thought maybe like second, third, fourth round, even potentially. All of a sudden he runs, the fastest 40 ever, and it's like okay, he's now like locked into the first round. Like no one's gonna let him get past. And I'm like, I don't know. To me, I think a little bit too much stock maybe the numbers, and like there's a lot of guys who I think play. There's some guys who play faster than what they record on the combine day. One guy that comes to mind is like a Jarvis Landry. Like I know he didn't really combine back when he did it, but then like he's a very quick guy, and like you saw in game, he was 50. He was able to made a very solid career for himself. So it's interesting how the numbers can kind of influence things. But overall, I thought it was a good combine. I think the most notable story, and we'll definitely address it later, is some of the non-participants in the combine. But in terms of the people that did show up, let's talk about them first. Let's give them their flowers.
Um,
How did you feel about the combine this
yeah,
year?
no, I thought it was good. It's weird. Sorry, it's weird because I normally there's things that I missed this year in the draft. I always like to see who had the most reps on the bench. I didn't really pay attention to that this year. I'm used to looking at the Rich Eisen, him do his 40. I don't think I saw that. The foundation that he has, the Run Rich Eisen Foundation or whatever it's called. I didn't see that. They normally do a commercial with that and a bunch of random people doing that. I didn't see that this year. I don't know. That was kind of weird, but I thought I thought overall it was a good draft. I feel like there's always that one guy that you're kind of looking for to see, like, man, I can't wait till he goes up there and he's supposed to run the 40 in this amount of time, or man, this offensive line prospect is supposed to be that dude, like I felt like this is a draft that's there's a lot of talent across the board, you know what I mean? There's not like those top, you know, 5 or 6 guys that you're like, I have to see this guy perform, and he's getting, this guy's getting all the coverage or stuff like that. I think that the drills were pretty much the same as they always are. Yeah, it's. I think maybe my draft, like me being as heavy into it, may also because we're drafting so late. So the Bucks, so it's maybe I'm not as invested as I normally would be to like some of the guys that are going to be the top, 5, 10 guys. But maybe that's also, I think it's also due to what we were just going to talk about, the guys that decide they don't want to participate, that they want to sit out. And what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the guys that say, "Hey, I'll do it on my pro day, or I will, yeah, I'm not going to work out at all. I'm not going to compete out here today."
Yeah, I mean we've talked about it before. My
Yeah.
opinion, I don't like it. I'm not people don't need to, I've heard some people say that the combine is like, like, oh, like you work out for me, like kind of like a meat market, I think I've heard it described as kind of thing. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I see like the concept of what people are saying, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I've always viewed it as NFL draft prospects, anyone who's about to get drafted, they are going from the best players in college football, which they were, to unproven NFL players. It's not the same level. So you have to earn that respect at the NFL level. You haven't done
Hmm.
anything in the NFL. You haven't won any Super Bowls yet. You haven't even completed a pass if you're a quarterback, Like I think this whole giving power back to the players. I'm for the players getting power. I love what NIL is doing and giving players
Yeah.
opportunity to make money off of themselves. But the concept of, oh, I'm too good to work out, it's the same concept of I'm too good to play for this team or that team. Like I should be on the best team. Like if you really believe
I
in
should be able to
yourself,
choose what team I'm on,
yeah,
essentially.
if you
Yeah.
believe in yourself, you should be going out there. You should be competing against people, proving to people I am that dude. I am the number one guy. And if anyone questions you, then let them, like prove them wrong. Like I just think it kind of shows a lack of confidence in themselves. Now there are some players who I've heard that are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, work out at my pro day instead. One guy, I think Jaden Daniels from LSU is doing it specifically because he wants his college teammates to get more people there watching him, like get them more publicity. I do respect something like that. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the NFL puts a lot of money into the combine, getting a combine invite and getting these people the opportunity to be in front of 32 NFL teams all at once. Like you don't get that opportunity all the time. Like who's to say that between now and your pro day you don't get hurt and then you don't work out at your pro day? Now nobody knows anything about you, like there's just so many factors that I'm like, if you're healthy and you're able to, and you get an invite to the combine, you should be signing that signing that letter and showing up as soon as possible. I don't see I don't respect really the skipping of the combine. What is your take on it?
No, I agree with you. And part of me wonders how much of that is like the agent telling them, don't do this. Uh, I take Caleb Williams for example. I mean, the guy didn't even want to do his medicals to be revealed. You know what I mean? Um, Part of me also wonders how much too is like I got that the NIL money, and maybe these athletes are being feeling like maybe they're like becoming a little bit more pampered and like uppity, and like, hey, maybe I don't need it's kind of a slap in the face, I think, to the league. I think it's a real privilege to be drafted into the NFL or into any sports organization, and for you to basically say, "Hey, I'm not going to work out," is almost like I'm too good for this. I already know I'm going to be the number one pick. I think you're right. It's the player empowerment. It's ruining. I'm for players having control of their brand and making as much money as they can, and being protected away from like because at the end of the day, it's a business and you can be cut at any moment. So I understand that part of it, but at the same time, it's like I want to see people compete. Like, you know what I mean? Like if Caleb Williams went out there and spun the ball and like killed it out there, like so much more respect to him. You know what I mean? Like go out there and show like you're the man. You know what I mean? Show you're the number one pick. Like go out there and you know spin the ball better than the next guy next to you and show like, man, I am that dude. I am that man. Like you should feel if you know you're gonna be the number one pick, go out there and show it. You don't necessarily. It almost seems like you're afraid to lose. Your draft stock is gonna drop because something's gonna be exposed. And I think the one thing I think about too, the cap has changed enough, in my opinion. Because remember back in the day, the cap used to be crazy. Number one used to make get a huge contract. But I think across the board, like one through what five, maybe 1 through 10, it's like there's not that big of a gap to like be afraid to kind of drop a little bit. You should go out there and compete in general, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't like it at all. I love watching the combine. I love seeing all those guys going out there and compete. You go and do your pro day, that's cool and everything, but it's an environment that you can control. Which I'm trying to always try and put myself in somebody else's shoes when I'm evaluating things like this. Like, would I do the same thing? You know what I mean? Like sitting this out and just kind of protecting my stock. And I don't, I don't, I don't know. I'm kind of old school with sports where I just like to see people compete. And I like it's the same thing in boxing, same thing in with this combine, same thing with basketball. Go out there and prove you're the man. Like I want to see your competitive spirit, your competitive fire. Like I want you to go out there and prove you're the best. So yeah,
And
it's unfortunate. It's the same thing with the bowl games as well. Before on the lead up to these events is guys sitting out of the bowl games, and the bowl games have lost their luster now. Now I think with the playoffs next year, I think that's going to change a little bit because more guys are going to be incentivized to play. But yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I was gonna say, to me, the difference between sitting out a bowl game and sitting out like the combine, like a bowl game,
hmm
you have people on the other team. Like, let's say you're a quarterback, you have at least 5 or 6 guys on the other team who are genuinely trying to tackle you, and like not, but then like they're not trying to hurt you, but like they're coming after you, and like it's their job to get to you. So it's like
yeah,
in something like the combine, even if you want to sit out the 40 and sit out some of these other things, like if you're a quarterback, you should be doing the quarterback drills. If you're a wide receiver, you should be doing the wide receiver drills. Like that, at least prove that you belong there. And like you said, with these people doing their pro day, so you're throwing, like at your pro day, you're throwing to the same receivers that you've been throwing to for at least a year, if not more than a year. Like
hmm
in the NFL, when you go and get drafted by a team, you're most likely not going to get those same receivers back on your team. You have to build rapport with new people, and like you have to be able to adjust to whatever weapons your team has. And
hmm
same thing as if you are a wide receiver, you're going to have to adjust to a new quarterback. So I think by limiting it to just your pro day, you're not showing any scouts that you can perform without the same cast of people that you've had your entire college career. So it's like someone like I saw a stat the other day. Someone was comparing was it Jaden Daniels to Lamar Jackson when they were both in college, and like
hmm
someone was like, well, if you look at who Jaden Daniels was throwing to in college, he was throwing to Brandon Ayuk, because he was at Arizona State originally, and then uh, Malik Neighbors, uh, some other good, Brian Thomas Jr. I think is the other LSU wide receiver. Like they listed off like 4 or 5 wide receivers that are like NFL first round talents, and then
yeah,
they listed Lamar Jackson's receivers, and it was like 4 or 5 guys that I had never heard of in my entire life. And it's like, that's the difference is like in the NFL, you're going to have like you're going to have different people. And especially if you're like first overall pick, most of the teams that draft a guy first overall do not have the weapons already in place, or they don't have the best O line ready to go. So it's like
Yeah.
adjusting to the circumstances. I think is important. Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, the general concept of skipping the combine, especially skipping like medicals. Like, I think
The medicals is just weird.
the biggest loser in all of this to me is the teams, because they're now getting less information as far as drafting you. The fans are
Mhm.
losing out because us as fans, like us as sports fans, want to see these people play and compete at the highest level, compete against the other top draft picks. So it's it's a bummer that, like, and I do, at the end of the day, I think it's selfish that they're not you know going out there, um, especially if the reason is because you're injured or something like that. I get it. That
Yeah.
makes sense to me. But if the
Yeah.
reason is that you'd rather just, you don't want to hurt your draft stock or whatever, then you're just, I don't know. To me, then you're just not confident in your abilities.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like you had J.J. McCarthy who's draft because of the other guys not competing. His draft stock went up. You know what I mean? He looked good. He threw the ball well. And if those other guys were out there, maybe people, the Caleb Williams, the Jaden Daniels, those guys were out there. Maybe there would be something to compare him against, and maybe he wouldn't have looked as good. Same thing with Penix Jr.
Yeah.
But those guys were lauded because there's the things that you do when people aren't looking. You know what I mean? Like, do you love the game? Do you love football? Like that's one of the things is like you have the guys that they just love football. You know what I mean? They love football, so they want to go out there, throw it at any point they can. You know what I mean? And that was one of the big highlights for J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. was video of them in the hotel, like in the hallways, throwing the ball, like and practicing. Obviously, they were going to be competing that day, so they needed to practice. But it's a good visual, like you know what I mean. As an owner of a team, somebody's going to spend millions of dollars, like seeing that. You know what I mean? Seeing these guys in the hallway throwing the football. Even if they were competing and the other guys weren't, but just to see that is like a really like a kind of something where you're like looking at them and saying their character and their drive for the game of football is there. You know what I mean?
And
And when you don't even do your medical and all you do is go up there and answer questions, it's just kind of like
you think about it too, who were the last two quarterbacks to play a college football game? Those two guys, J.J. McCarthy
mm-hmm,
and Michael Penix Jr. You know,
mm-hmm,
they were out there playing football in, I think, what, early to mid January was
yep,
when the championship game was. These other guys,
mm-hmm,
most of them, is and I think a couple of them did skip their bowl game. They haven't been on the field since early December, maybe, or like even earlier than that, possibly. So,
mm-hmm.
like, these guys are out there, competing for a championship. They're on winning teams. They have more film on them than most of these other guys because they've played more games because they're in the college football playoff, and they're still going out there and saying, "Hey, I want to go." Like, it's kind of like you see that winner's mentality of they were winners on the field, and then they show up to the combine, and like, you know, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb
Drake
Williams,
May,
those three
mm-hmm,
guys, they weren't, like, they didn't make it in the national championship playoff, or like, I mean, it's
yeah,
not all on
and,
them, it's a team sport, obviously, but
yeah. The other side of that though is if J.J. McCarthy was projected to be a top three pick, would he have gone out and done that? Same thing with Penix Jr. You know what I mean? It's kind of the it's kind of like the question though is like would they have gone out there and competed at the combine had their draft stock been solidified like the Drake May, the Caleb Williams, the because at that point they have something to prove. And obviously they went out there and improved their stock, which is the goal of why they went out there and did it. But um I think too we were talking about this the other day. The last time two guys that I can remember, two of the top quarterbacks that were in the championship, went out and competed during the combine was last that I can remember that the top two guys was Mariota and Winston.
Yeah.
And Winston went out there and competed. You know what I mean? He went out there and he tried to exert his dominance over the rest of the field, really, and show he was the guy. And I can appreciate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, for our sake as fans, we want to see that. We want to see a guy who's going to go out there, and I always go back to this example. I have a lot of respect for Baker Mayfield, even from
Yeah.
before he was drafted. Like other guys like Josh Rosen were like, oh, Cleveland, like I don't want to go to Cleveland, and Baker Mayfield was like, Cleveland, please take me. I want to be the guy that makes Cleveland from a loser into a winner. And for a little bit of time, he did. He got them to the playoffs for the first time ever. So that kind of mentality, I think, of and I'm not saying any of the guys that are, playing right now have said that they don't want to, play for any team or whatever. But I just feel like the more that you're out there, the more you're competing, the better of a look it is,
Yeah, and you touched on something there. Like as a fan, like we've talked about this several times. This is one of my favorite times of the year because I love to get into the minds of like the GMs, the scouts, these guys that are making this, because it's a huge financial decision. It can set your franchise back, or it can propel you forward. So what all goes into their decision making? I love, the Wonderlic test is kind of like, it's like, we've
they've been
seen that
phasing that
guys.
they've been phasing
Huh?
that out anyways. I think
That's what I
they
was
have a
wondering
new
because I
test.
didn't hear anything about that
I think there's
this
like
year.
a new test that's supposedly a little bit better, but
Okay.
it's still, I think it's the same test they had last year, which like CJ Stroud didn't do particularly well on. So it's like, that test isn't a given to say one way or the other if you're going to be good.
Yeah. But I like looking at everything that encompasses the team's decision. Like, why did they pick this guy versus not pick this guy over that guy? And then I love looking back after the fact and saying, damn, this team missed out on this guy, or man, like you look at, man, we could have had that guy. I just realized that the Cowboys. I was listening to something the other day where um, it was uh Travis Kelsey was saying that the Cowboys skipped out on him because they heard he had he smoked weed. So, like, imagine him on the Cowboys. You know what I mean? Like how that could have helped them. So I love going back in retrospect and looking at it like, okay, these were the factors that led up to their decision. And obviously, they never reveal everything that they were thinking or their draft board or anything like that. Years later, these stories tend to come out where, oh, we had this guy on the draft board and picked this guy, and this is why, this is why we did this is why we did that. But when you don't have all some of the factors in place, like Caleb Williams or his medical, or at the pro day he did this, or any of these guys, when you don't have all of those factors as a fan, it lessens the experience of my fan as like the armchair GM of, oh, I would have taken this guy over that guy, 'Cause that's really what I love doing, is looking at how a guy it fits into the system that they're building, why they believe he can fit into the system, why it worked, why it didn't work. And you don't have all the pieces. It's not as fun of an experience from a fan on an armchair GM perspective.
And I even love looking back, after a guy like has done 3 or 4 successful seasons, a guy who
Mm.
went in like the 5th round and being like, let me
Oh, I
look
love
back at
that.
what he did at the combine. How did this guy sneak through? Why did nobody draft him? And sometimes it's the whole
Like
small
Puka.
school thing. Sometimes it's he ran a bad 40, whatever. But it's like, I love seeing that kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
looking back,
those are the best stories. I mean, like Puka,
yeah.
um, and like Brock Purdy. Like, why did these teams not draft these guys, or how did everybody miss? You know what I mean? How did everybody miss on the talent? Like, is it the coaching? Like, he just got into the perfect scheme, and maybe he just never had an opportunity. Maybe he's from a small school. What did he do in his evaluation of the team see that made them pass on him? All that stuff is interesting to me. And then you have guys that aren't really doing any of that anymore. And it's just kind of like it's not as fun of an experience getting into the draft and looking back in retrospect and I even love the redrafts. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
When you don't have all the evidence of why teams did things, or at least pieces of the evidence, pieces of the puzzle, you can't do that.
yeah, for sure. I think, so I think right now, like, this is kind of I mean, it's been happening for a couple years, but like, this is, I think, the most egregious one of people skipping the draft. But like,
It's going to get
in
worse and worse. Yeah.
in 5 years or so, like, is there even going to be a combine? Are people even going to go? Like, or are all the guys just going to say, nah, or like, it's just going to be like
Pro days.
pro days, or like, the combine might just be like, I don't want to say second tier, because not saying that there's players that are second tier, but like, like, first round guys just won't go. If you think you're a potential first round draft pick, you're like, oh no, I'm too good, I'm not gonna go. Like, it's just gonna get worse and worse. It's setting a bad precedent for the future. That's one of my main concerns with what's going on in today's combine era.
No, I agree with that. I agree. Yeah, I think they'll still be the guys that have they're kind of in between the first, second round that will still go out there. 1 through 10, those guys may just say screw this. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, it's I don't know. Hopefully, there's some. You shouldn't have to incentivize guys to go out and do the combine, but hopefully there's some type of wave. I think it's the mentality to this, like the player mentality. You see in basketball, all sports now. These athletes are very. It's a very different dynamic. More about their brand and protecting themselves than proving themselves. You know what I mean? And being that ultimate competitor. I think that mindset is kind of going out the window in probably majority of sports now.
The
Um,
incentive could be that they're about to get paid $25 million if first overall or top 10 or whatever. Like, that should be
True.
incentive enough. But I think it's going to take some big changes to, like, the legislation or something of the NFL in order to, like,
Like a
require
CDA or something.
require non-injured players to attend the combine, things like that. I think that's where the NFL might try to go with it. But I know the NFL also has other priorities. They're trying to add more games to the season, which all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how much they value this, but I mean, this is like a way for the NFL to make money, uh through televising, these workouts and things like that. Like, so it's
It's
go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
No, I was just saying it's such a long off season. I saw somebody post something the other day, 50 weeks until the start of the regular season. So for them, from a eyes on the NFL perspective, it makes sense for them to want people to tune into this because you have this, then you have free agency, then you have they're always trying to have something lined up, the schedule release or something lined up to keep people vested in the sport until August and September roll around where people are actually playing. So
Yeah.
it would make sense for them to want to have people keep people tuning into this and have the top guys participating to some degree.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, tying it back a little bit, to the combine, I think, one of the topics we wanted to talk about was, our company, Extropian. We are developing technology that, we hope is going to be, used in a lot of different industries, but one of the main ones we've been focusing on is sports athletics. Um, so, and we've had these discussions, Ricky, about, the concept of using our technology in like a combine kind of like metric, like very analytically focused setting. Do you want to talk a little bit about, what that kind of thought process is, or what, how you kind of see that playing out in the future?
yeah, we've talked about it before. It's like there's so much evaluation that goes into each one of these players. I mean, guys are being evaluated and scouted from high school all the way up through even before high school all the way through college. Um, we've talked about the capabilities that our technology has and what it can do and how it can be so beneficial to not only the athlete kind of marketing themselves, showing their skill set, and building their skill set, like having their eyes on data that they weren't privy to before to figure out gaps in how they can become better. And then there's other proponents to that we've talked about, and kind of the future of the company that will take that even a step further, where they will be able to really assess to another level what they need to do to become better, or to if they have a certain goal or something they want to achieve, or a level they want to reach, that the technology can help them get there. But even from the scouting perspective, being able to analyze each one of these players in ways they never have before. But what we said is kind of like, the combine's cool because everybody kind of evaluates these players, at one time, put them through all these drills and things like that. But what if you had the ability to have uh, a level of that type of analysis, or even a deeper level analysis, what we're able to do in your pocket at all times? You know what I mean? You go to a game and you're able to assess that. You go scouting, you're able to assess that. So it's like, yeah, you can do that, and then you go to a combine setting, and you can do that as well. But you have eyes on these players, throughout their playing career. You're able to see how they look, and then measure them up against their peers in ways you never have before. And I think the diversity of our technology will allow for that. And I think what we have will honestly take this sport to a whole other level. It will. I think the athletes will be able to prepare themselves in a way they never have before. And overall, the end goal of all of this, like we would say, help everybody be the best version of themselves, but also to make the game just better, make it more exciting. Make the athletes more durable, keep them healthier, and then help the sport reach levels it never has before. We always look at Tyreek Hill running 22 miles per hour. Let's get that guy running 25, 26 miles per hour, because he's able to assess his movement, his body, and his game in ways he never has before. I think that's what we're going to be. That's honestly what we're aiming for. What we're able to do. That's what our technology unlocks. And yeah, so excited for not only this sport but other sports, and opening new avenues and doors for understanding of self that has never been present before in human history.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the NFL Combine does some good things, in terms of, like, they have a lot of different ways to measure different things. They measure straight line speed with the 40, but then, they also have the 3-cone drill, and, the
Mm-hmm.
10-yard split. So they do measure some other variations of speed without directly measuring, other than the 40-yard dash. But I think, one thing that we kind of hinted on earlier is the idea of, like, play speed, right? Like, what is, when you're
Mm-hmm.
on the field, when you're competing against those guys, how fast can you get in and out of those breaks? As a quarterback, how fast can you release the ball? Things like that. And, like, a lot of those things are kind of they're measured right now, but in a very antiquated way, like kind of an older, like, stopwatch kind of way. And I'd really love to
Yeah,
see some of those same kind of things progress further, and being able to evaluate people based on their play in a game. I think, and that's kind of, I think, what you were hinting at as well, that that's kind of where we see our fitting in the best.
yeah. And it's a lot of these metrics are one size fits all for different position groups, different um, roles in each position group. I think the beauty of what we do is we're able to really filter it down and make it a finite evaluation
Yeah,
of each group, and what each one of them has a job they want to do. They want to move in a specific way. Their movements are very specific to their group and whatever they're trying to complete. So that's what I love about our technology, is it takes away that one size fits all, and we essentially fit it to the individual's needs, and to that group's needs, or to that specific player's needs. And then that evaluation process just looks completely different, in my opinion. It's not an across the board evaluation. It's very individualistic. and like I said, focusing on those finite movements for each group and each individual, and that's where I believe we're taking, we're going to take the game to the next level on the ability to evaluate and understand yourself, and for teams and decision makers to understand the players in a way they never have before. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited about a lot of things that we talked about and the capabilities that we want to bring to not only football but to other sports. And our technology has the capability to do that, unlike anything else out on the market right now.
Yeah, definitely agree. So, go ahead.
Did you want to wrap up, or I know we were gonna, and this for the audience out there, we're gonna do a mock draft in the future where we can kind of talk a little bit more, or did you want to talk about some of the prospects, or do you want to save that for when we do our mock draft?
I mean, we can save it for when we do our mock draft.
Okay.
I think hopefully we do a decent job. I'm a big fan of when I do my mock draft, trying to make it so that the teams actually draft people that they were going to draft. Like we talked about this before we hopped on here. The simulations are like, oh yeah, like this team's gonna draft this guy that like is not at all who they would draft. Like who need and don't need, and it's like they'll just send whoever to like whatever team based on like I guess the rankings on that specific website. Some guys are like terribly underranked.
Well, it's like also too, don't bias it where you're like, okay, the Bucks are at 26 and Dolphins are 17. Let me push all these guys to the front and then allow these guys to kind of slide down so we can get we select freaking Drake May and at number 26 or something. No, we're gonna make it realistic.
Yeah, that's also been something that I've struggled with in the past, but I promise for our mock I'll be realistic, even if it's someone that I want the Dolphins to get, or for you the Bucks to get. But
yeah, no, we'll do it. We'll have fun. We'll make the assessments of what teams actually need and what we think they're going to do. So it's more of a prediction than our selfish. We want our teams to get the guy that we want. So
for sure.
Awesome. So again, thank everybody for tuning in. We always discussing the technology a little bit, but getting closer and closer. I'm doing some testing out there now. Actually collecting data and building a couple of parameters here for our devices and our platform. So we're getting closer to revealing this to everybody and showing everybody how amazing this technology is. And yeah, it's gonna open a whole new world for everybody, from amateurs all the way to professionals. So excited to do that. Excited to show that here later on during the year, and hope you guys keep tuning in and following us. And with that being said, we'd like to wish you guys a happy week, a great weekend, and yeah, peace out. Thank you guys.
Thank you.